Hello and welcome back to the Comic Lyria podcast. I'm Ryan, also known as Comic Stan. I love comic books, my co-host loves regular books, and I make him read comic books and then we talk about them in depth. And with me as always is my aforementioned insane co-host, it's Jamie. I forgot to pick a word.
That was fucking weak.
It was fine. It was
weak.
Weak would be if I messed up or got it wrong. The words got out in the correct order. All right, you do then. Go on.
Hello and welcome to the Comic Literate podcast. No, I can't be asked.
Weak. Doesn't feel so good, does it?
I mean, you're mistaking me for somebody who cares about anybody else's opinion.
I mean, I can tell by the way you're dressed.
Oh!
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It was just a fun thing. It was a fun rebuttal.
Name 3 Black Sabbath songs.
Really?
No, of course you know.
So name the albums. So, back at it again with an episode that will actually be technically released in the month of October, which means we are officially, you know what that means?
Is it spooky season?
We're the spooky season!
Hey, I've waited a year for that.
And, you know, homicidal clowns, I think that's like it's the best way to start off, isn't it? It's absolutely nothing to do with the Joker film coming out now.
I mean, when Alan Moore comes and murders us both for talking about his comic books again on the podcast,
he's going to murder me double because I think I'm going to have another Alan Moore impression later in the episode as well. So, you know, fantastic stuff. So, Batman, The Killing Joke, finally doing it, even though no one asked us to, but we are finally
no one cares.
Here. But it was appropriate. Joker films coming out, and we're in the Alan Moore-verse, you know?
Yeah.
We've got Alan Moore ectoplasm still with, you know...
from Watchmen.
On us and in us, you know?
How did it get in you?
I mean, when you talk about Alan Moore, he's like Jesus. He's in all of us.
I told you to wear the mask, bro.
What does that mean?
I told you to put the mask on. I told you shouldn't get any of the ectoplasm in you. Really bad.
I've got news to break it to you, but it's not the mask that stops it getting in.
Oh. Oh dear.
Alan was really going to hate us. If he didn't already, or if he ever knew who we were. But speaking of Alan Moore, Batman: The Killing Joke, one of the seminal comics from the 80s in amongst a bunch of big releases in the 80s, it turns out. I mean, within these few years, we had Crisis on Infinite Earths, biggest DC crossover event ever.
Preacher?
Maybe. Oh, no, not 80s. I don't think it was. All right. Now you've said it. Now I need to check. So I don't think that is the case.
Or is Preacher like 2000s?
I don't know well enough to state specifically.
I liked it.
95 to 2000. So
but
way off base. No, I'm talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started around this time, Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, bloody Watchmen, and then literally like a year later, this. So 2 of Moore's biggest ones within this time as well. Basically, the late 80s was a time to be alive if you were a comic book fan. Maybe you didn't appreciate it at the time. Maybe we don't appreciate the comic books that are being released in our time.
I think we appreciate them well enough.
I mean, we do, but maybe the royal we.
Is that the
correct use of that phrase?
The book buying establishment.
The comic book buying and the book buying establishment to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is one of those comics that you would have seen in a bookshop, like an actual bookshop. Like the ones, this is one of the big 3 that was like graphic novels. I mean, not a big 3, sorry. Big 3 were like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, and Mouse. Were like, these are graphic novels. These are art now. But I think this comes pretty close within that conversation.
Yeah, I remember when I first started reading comics, this is one that I read because other kids on my English degree had read it and said it was good.
We're like, this is art.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Other kids were like, oh my God, I'm so edgy. I've read this like Batman comic from the 80s. It's like super dark, man. That's what we sounded like.
Oh yeah, and they weren't.
And we had little round sunglasses on
and berets.
Yeah. Smoked hand-rolled cigarettes.
The classic group.
Absolutely.
And they weren't wrong. It is a pretty dark one, and I think a good place to start with this one is, as I've mentioned earlier, basically, I did a little digging, did a little investigation.
Yeah.
I've managed to find. I say managed to find. It was a quick Google search. I managed to find the original script for The Killing Joke. And the only reason I bring up now...
is this one of those terrible Alan Moore scripts where it's just like garbled nonsense with no punctuation?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's all in capital letters.
It's all in capital letters again.
He just caps lock on, he's like, let's go.
He had caps lock on his typewriter.
Yes. Oh God, I don't think he had lowercase. I think he fixed it so it doesn't...
His typewriter didn't have lowercase.
I never use lowercase.
I never use lowercase, or don't.
That's...
Well, in Mordor, don't use a lowercase.
No, it's more.
Well, no, he's from the Midlands, isn't he?
Yeah, but he doesn't sound like, not everyone, like, I don't sound Norfolk. I do sometimes, but most of the time I don't.
Yeah, that's because I'm not confident you're actually from around here.
You up, boy?
That's no. How? See, this is the thing. You claim to
feel like I'm in an immigration interrogation.
You're trying to cross the Suffolk-Norfolk border to get into Norfolk, and I'm just there in like a little uniform. Hey, we man, where do you come from then, boy?
And I'll be like, are you got a light, boy? I think he's past it. I think he's...
Oh, I don't know, my man. Hold you hard, boy. Hold you hard.
What do you call a ladybird?
Bishy.
A Bishy Barnaby.
The Bishy Barnaby,
yes.
Yeah.
So I knew the second part, so...
What do you call a donkey?
I don't know.
Dicky.
We are so stupid. as a county and a nation. That's ridiculous. So, starting off, his script... the first couple paragraphs, I think it's a good way. He always starts it with a flashy way, you know? And I want to bring that energy to the podcast episode.
Right, okay.
We will start talking about the actual comic itself very quickly. But I just want to start with this. So it's 46 pages.
Okay.
The comic itself, I think, is only like 42 pages. So a lot of description.
Yeah.
And we go with panel 1. He doesn't actually mention panel 1 until about the third paragraph. But it's marked panel 1 right at the start. So, well... I've checked the landing gear, fastened my seatbelt, swallowed my cigar in a single gulp, and ground my scotch and soda out in the ashtray provided. So I suppose we're all set for takeoff. Before we go screeching off into these angry creative skies from which we may both well return as blackened cinders, I suppose it's a few preliminary notes are in order. So sit back while I run through them with accompanying hand movements from our charming stewardess in the center aisle.
Is this actually how Alan Moore writes his notes?
This is caps lock Alan Moore original script.
Fucking clinically insane, isn't he?
And the second line, right? That's fair enough. Like, you know, he's having a laugh. Second, the first line of the second paragraph. Gotham. Not even yet. Not even. Firstly, since I'm not entirely sure how these graphic novels are set out, you've written Watchmen already. Like, what are you on about?
Are you shitting me?
He said that.
So he'd already done The Man Who Has Everything at this point. What year are we in?
88. March 88.
So he's already done The Man Who Has Everything.
Oh, the Superman one. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
He's done The Man Who Has Everything.
Yes.
He's done
Watchmen. Like,
he's done Watchmen.
Yeah.
Has he done V for Vendetta yet?
He must have done, I reckon, yeah.
And he's done From Hell.
Yes.
Already.
He must have done, yeah.
Find out.
Right.
Like, we can't. The problem is we can't get these things wrong anymore because people then complain that we haven't researched the podcast.
Oh, I've
properly.
seen the YouTube video. I've seen the YouTube comments, so I know all too well.
Yeah.
So it came out from a serial from 89 to 98. So wow, bloody hell! No way did that take 10 years to release. No.
A Killing Joke.
No, bloody From Hell. Published in serial form from 89 to 98. Took like 9 years to release From Hell. What bloody caps lock probably broke on his keyboard.
It took him 9 years to do From Hell. I mean, it's good. It's really good.
I don't believe it took that long to release it. It might an issue a year.
I mean, it's a fairly. I read it as a paperback. It's a fairly hefty volume.
We'll have to do it at some point and then get into the nitty-gritty of it. But he did From Hell after this, so maybe that was more his passion project.
So had he done V for Vendetta yet then?
Let's consult the Google. 82 to 85 was V. So he'd already done that.
So he'd done V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
He'd written on Superman.
Yep.
He'd written Watchmen.
I'm pretty sure he did Swamp Thing as well, which is like, and to be fair, that was a graphic novel that was like an ongoing series. So maybe that doesn't count.
But he'd written on Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. That has to be a joke.
It must be. It's Alan
Moore's,
you
little
Al
prankster.
Moore is bloody humour. He's
Alan Moore, the prankster.
You never know when he's cracking wise.
Cracking wise,
because his face stays the same.
His face and tone of voice stay the same, and he remains in all caps.
Exactly. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but bloody hell, if you want if you want to laugh, look it up.
Can we just skip to what he actually describes the first panel as?
I'll scroll through and try and find it.
Yeah, how long does that take? Rolling?
I read the first line of the third paragraph.
Yeah.
It still isn't at it. I want you to feel as comfortable and unrestricted as possible during the several months of your bitterly brief mortal lifespan that you'll spend working on this job. I think that was for the artist.
Wow. That's weird, isn't it?
Not in the first.
Imagine if you started a new job and that is how the person training you described it.
I mean, amazing, but it is slightly different relationship here because we'll move on for this. Maybe we'll come back to this if I find some lines. I'll have a skim when you have like a long talk. I'll have a skim through, see if I can find some good lines and where the first panel
is. Yeah.
I mean, it must be. I'm looking through this and it's still going on.
As a side note.
Okay, so I've got to, at least he's mentioning the first page, and he says, this first page and a couple of the subsequent ones have 9 panels apiece, albeit with very little or no dialogue to clutter them up. But he got that from Dave Gibbons from Watchmen.
He did.
Which was going to be my first point on the art, but it's interesting that he's mentioning it here at least.
Yeah, because one of the things that I really noticed from that opening is that it's very reminiscent of the way that the Watchmen opens.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's probably one of those things where he saw it in Watchmen and was like, oh, that's pretty good, and I'll take that on, potentially. But yeah, it just keeps going. I think third page is where we've got to like talking about panels and describing them. But yeah, it's classic more. But the reason I say the relationship is interesting is because if we can't, and this is going to be an interesting one, we're going to have to somewhat combine comic credits section with starting for the arting because they're kind of intrinsically linked in the discussion. So do you mind if I just take these two sections and kind of mix them together in the vortex?
You know I don't care.
I'm just checking with you first. I don't want to turn this on, this vortex, and then it's like the Hadron Collider. If you turn it on, it's easy. Turning it down or off is like
Brian,
really
I am a vortex
of chaos.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know that. But again, you don't want the polarity of two different vortexes. God help if anyone's just tuning in this for the first episode.
We're just rambling.
They get to the comic?
When do they talk about the Joker?
Exactly. I clicked for the Joker or Killing Joke. Same thing. Anyway, I mixed them two because they're intrinsically linked.
Okay, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yes, the reason being is because writer, obviously, old Al Moore, but
his old Ali,
Almo, as we call him,
Almo,
because we're good friends with him.
Absolutely,
yeah. And it's like an Elmo joke. It's like Elmo likes killing.
Almo hates comic book fans.
Yeah, Almo thinks you're man babies. Get your Elmo for the Christmas at the shops now.
Oh, do you know what? If someone came out with an Alan Moore doll, I would buy you one.
No, I don't want my name on the adapted movie.
If they made an Alan Moore doll, imagine how complicated the process of getting the rights to Alan Moore's likeness to make a toy.
I don't think it's complicated. I think it's just simply no. I don't think it's not complex like solve my riddles. He's just shut the door on you.
Oh, but no, it'd get all wizardy. It would be like that scene in Harry Potter where he's like, oh, I don't know Harry Potter.
You're starting down the wrong road. So
yeah, I was knocking. I opened a door in my brain there that didn't have anything behind it.
I mean, who of us in this room have not had that on this podcast multiple times a week?
Absolutely.
So, the reason I mention it is because the art and colors is linked to or credited to a Brian Bolland, depending on the pronunciation. Bolland, let's say. But the reason it's unique here is because the original press, as I messaged you earlier, is actually colored differently. So what happened originally was Mr. Bolland did all the art, did the all the drawing and everything and the shading, but he didn't have time to get the colors done for whatever reason I haven't found. So they had to get someone who is. I actually got the name confused because initially it's basically it's a John Higgins who they got in the coloring. For some reason in my mind, I read it as Dave Gibbons. I was like, oh, they got Watchmen guy. Like, that makes sense. And I was like, wait, I just read the completely wrong name. They're like 2 letters the same.
You just wanted it to be Dave Gibbons.
Yeah. But anyway, it was John Higgins who did the color, right?
Why do I recognize that name?
I don't know. I thought I recognized it and I was wrong. So I don't recognize it at all. But maybe from something else we potentially read. But the main reason is, have you had a chance to look at the original colors?
I only read the version with the original colors.
That's interesting. I technically read the updated one. So the updated one in 2008, they re-released it with Brian doing the colors.
So we're having a conversation about what is essentially two different comic books.
Two different colored versions of comics, which I think is, to be fair, is an interesting point.
It is a very interesting point. It's the first time it's ever happened.
And this is why I would say we're starting with the acting with the comic credits.
I'm very quickly, because I'm confident that...
You probably originally read, because we both read this before, you probably read the updated version later. Because I think it's a way better version than the original colors.
The copy that I read was a very old library edition of the complete book.
But it depends when that book was released.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I was a good librarian. I'm not that good a librarian.
I mean, no, you don't have to check the date of everything you read, do you?
Well, no, but I am very quickly going to look at the 2008 version.
Fair enough.
Just to see if I even notice a difference.
You definitely will notice a difference. I guarantee it.
Oh, wow.
Pretty different.
Completely different comic book.
Exactly. And that's crazy. Because again, I only read the 2008 version and then discovered, I looked up one panel just to see what a thing was, which I'll get into later. And I saw two versions of it. I was like, what's this other version? And then went down this rabbit hole of like, oh, there's two completely different versions of this book.
So I'm confident that the version I originally read is the updated 2008 version.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
Because
I think that's the more popular, I think that's the more like common version to find, because I think they updated it for a reason.
Yeah, in fairness, the original, now that I've read the 2008 version, the original looks a little bit weird.
It's crazy, isn't it? Like the colors, the choice of colors, like I think I get what they were going for with this. I think what it was an attempt to use the colors to tell the story of when it gets more unhinged and insane, because the whole book is essentially about sanity and, you know, being pushed off into insanity in one bad day and all that. So I think the moments that it seems to get more insane, emotionally charged, the colors just go crazy, don't they?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And then in the more sane moments, it's closer to the 2008 version, where it just kind of looks more normal. Still different colors, but it looks like a normal scene. But some scenes are just like one or two colors for the entire panel. Like it's an interesting choice.
So the 2008 version certainly makes it look more akin to a modern comic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It also, so the main differences, let's start there.
Yeah.
The 2008 version has all of the retroactive stuff, the flashback stuff in black and white.
Yes, which I think was a great choice.
Really common trope, though.
Yeah, but I think it works so well here.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? And adding a sepia tone to something is a really neat and tidy way of saying this happened in the past.
Is sepia kind of orangey, or is it just grey?
Sepia tone is essentially a name for faded black and grey that's yellowed.
Okay, yeah, because I think sometimes I've seen sepia that's more yellowed, and because you know what I think with that, with like modern film and television, is this takes place in Mexico. Because if you watch Breaking Bad, that is that in a nutshell, and a bunch of other stuff uses it as well.
Do you know what?
We're in Mexico now. Everything's orange.
I'm not going to pass comment on that. I'm just going to let that one pass by me.
Watch Breaking Bad. It literally
I've not seen Breaking Bad.
I was going to say that's wild, but knowing you, that makes sense. It's a pop culture thing, isn't it?
No, because it came out. I'll tell you exactly what it was. It came out at a time when I didn't own a TV, being entirely honest here. And everyone kept telling me how great it was, and so I never bothered with it.
I like the conversation going like, have you seen Breaking Bad? No, I haven't got a TV. You really should. It's like, but I haven't got a TV.
Well, this is it, right? So I was a poor student. And again, not having, like, I think a lot of people think that the not having a TV thing was like, oh, I'm so cool, man. I don't have a TV. I'm wearing my little sunglasses.
It does sound kind of like that. We've already established that you were in that group at that time.
Yeah, but I just moved once a year.
Yeah, you can carry a television with you.
No, they're big and heavy. The reality of it is that I didn't want to fucking move one.
You get a little TV. I mean, but at that point, you could have a laptop. We're debating semantics.
And I obviously had a laptop, right. and I watched some TV on the laptop. But Breaking Bad just wasn't one that I bothered with.
So we're going more with because everyone was overhyping it, you felt kind of resistant to that. And I totally empathize with that. I had that with Game of Thrones. Like, I put off Game of Thrones for ages for the same reason.
And so I got into Game of Thrones like halfway through season 1. before everyone was hyping it. I was one of the people hyping Game of Thrones to you. I distinctly remember. And then you watched it.
I was the first one to.
And then you watched it, didn't you? And you liked it.
I probably told this story before, but again, for new listeners, you hear this cool story.
Is this where you would sneaking references into your friends?
Yeah, I didn't tell anyone I was watching it. And I had a bunch of friends who were really into it, yourself included. And then if we were all hanging out, I would slip in Game of Thrones references.
Yeah.
And they would be like, have you watched it? And I'm like, nah, I heard someone else say it. And it was what little ones like, someone's talking about having a cold or being ill. And I was like, I probably got grayscale. And they're like, that's a reference. I'm like, I don't know, I've heard someone else say it. Or I saw it in a meme. And then eventually someone was like paying someone back. And I was like, no, Lannisters always pay their debts. And like, right, you've watched it, haven't you? And eventually when I caught up, I revealed like, gentlemen, I have actually watched Game of Thrones. They're like, yeah, we know. We know now.
We know you've been referencing it for weeks.
But it was funny. The frustration was funny. Yeah. So
anyway, the differences.
Yes. Back to the comic.
They, in recoloring it, they've modernized the art drastically, I think. And they've made it look, to a certain degree, kind of like the DC house style of the 2000s.
I still think quite different to that. The main thing I kind of
noticed...
It's
getting there, though.
Yeah. The drawing is what really gets my attention, because that hasn't changed. Like, that's unchanged. Yes. And that's fantastic. Like, I love the drawing on the panels.
It's good.
But in terms of the colors, I think it's a kind of muted colors, which I keep mentioning on whenever I see it on comic books. But the difference is, I think they work better because they're actually paired with, I don't know what the word is, we've been over this before, pitch black and like hard white. If you know, like, what's the, pure white? So it's got those high contrasting colors in the black and the white. The gray in the middle kind of works a lot better than when everything is kind of muted colors.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, you're talking about contrast.
Yeah. But a lot of the modern ones, and I think in that house style, as you say, it's a lot of its muted colors without the black and the white. So it all looks kind of grayish without these like contrast points to reference against.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you there.
And here, the black, it works especially with the characters, because a lot of the black is from Batman with like his cape and his shadow art, and a lot of the white is the Joker makeup. So those things, there's a lot of other blacks and whites in there as well, but those things contrasting especially.
And they've definitely made Batman's suit darker. Because we have a very navy Batman suit.
Well, this was around the time, I think, when he still had, like, blue pants, like, as a look. And I think making it all darker definitely works. Definitely feeds into the comics at the time, like, once we'd been through the 90s and everything was darker. So I see what you mean, that this being done in 2008. It's weird because it still has that original line work, which is very of its time in the 80s, like, in an innovationally kind of way. But the colors are more updated of its noughties era. So it's a really unique mix for a comic book when you think of like the difference between the line work style and the color style.
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I am just looking at some comparison. I'm literally looking at the panels side by side.
The other thing to mention as well is Bolland has said specifically the colors he redid in 2008 are what he originally intended to do in 88. So it kind of stands to reason that could have been what it would have been if he had done the colors. So maybe it is still 80s. And again, maybe that style was becoming influential in the 80s to inform the house style of the late 90s and early noughties.
I think I prefer the original.
I think it's too crazy. I think it's...
I like it. I
think when you got entire panels that are like one or two colors, and they're crazy colors as well. Like they're
not they're just colors.
They're like strong red, like really vibrant red, yellow, green, blue. Like it's all primary colors, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting choice that doesn't work for me. Like I'm not going to say it's bad, but I definitely have one preference over the other.
It certainly looks a bit more idiomatic of what Moore's work looked like at the time. You can tell that whomever did this had a little look at Watchmen and said, this is what this guy likes.
But even Watchmen never... The scenes that are more kind of normal are definitely close to Watchmen. But then every other scene is like a crazy like splash of color, which is not Watchmen. Like Watchmen was always very good to be, in the lines, very... trying to think what it is. The color choices in Watchmen were more interesting than the use of color, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Because like, with Watchmen, it was always like grey muted colors with like very vibrant ones at specific points, like Dr. Manhattan Blue and the color red whenever blood, like from the comedian, and the yellow of the badge. Whereas this, and that's like choices, but they were always within the lines. This is literally like entire panels are just one or two colors. And I think it is just meant to be like, look how crazy things are getting, you know?
But it's a Joker comic. It's a story almost entirely about the Joker.
And this is what I said earlier. It fits the theme. The theme is like insanity. And these are moments when, you know, people are becoming insane and emotionally charged and less rational. So I get the point of it, and I think it's a really interesting technique. I just didn't like the execution with what they chose for that, or the colors they chose for that.
Which I can appreciate. I mean, I've been while we've been talking, I've been having a little scroll between the two versions side by side, and you're right. There are moments where the updated colors and the updated coloring provides a more grounded experience.
Yeah.
But overall, I do have a preference for the original, I think.
Well, one of our famous agree to disagree
Absolutely.
kind of points.
I just think that...
I think it's interesting we had the people can choose from both. Like,
well, and isn't that such an interesting thing that could only acceptably happen in this medium?
Exactly.
And I remember when we talked about Scott Pilgrim, you'd read the updated version in colour, hadn't you?
Yes, yeah.
And I'd read the original in black and grey. And we had different experiences of it. And I suppose it's one of those things that actually you can have two very different experiences of A Killing Joke. You've either... And because I remember reading it. So I had access to both, and I chose to read the original because I thought that was what you were going to do.
Yes. I didn't even know there was options until like quite close to the time.
Yeah,
I was like,
absolutely.
by the way, there's a different version.
And I read this years ago. And so I remember thinking, I don't remember this being quite as wild and zany as it is. And I didn't really think too much about the fact that I was reading potentially a different version than the one I read the first time round.
What's interesting is, for this comic being apparently like famous and well regarded since it released in the 80s, I've only ever seen the updated 2008 panels, like when people are sharing them and talking about them. I think what's especially interesting is that it was redone by the original artist.
Yes.
It kind of has a sense of like almost like a director's cut, which is a touchy subject in films because that can go either way, can't it? Like
people don't like director's cuts anymore, do they?
It's because it's kind of been bastardized by like, I mean, especially bloody Zack Snyder. Like he's the one that's kind of turned into like well, it's bad now, but wait till you see the director's cut. It's like, just do a good one first. Like, what were you on about? It turned into like this director versus studio kind of thing. And I get like studios interfere with especially comic book movies like all the time. Yeah. So there's an argument there, but I don't like this like directors being like, well, if I'd had my way. It's like, well, if you signed up for this, you signed up for the making a film for the studio, not the studio allowing you to make your film. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really different kettle of fish. And
part of the magic of what makes modern cinema interesting is the compromise between the artist and the studio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. And I agree with you. It's really interesting that it's the original artist who's done it.
Yes.
Because this is the job that he... Again, it looks too modern. It doesn't look like this is what he would have done with it in the 80s. And how can we know what he would have done with it 30 years prior?
True. And this was a thing with bloody... Again, going back to Zack Snyder and Justice League is the famous example. He had to bow out for personal tragedy reasons. And then Joss Whedon, scandal noted, stepped in, finished it. And it was just extremely mid, if at best mid, worst bad. Then he redid Justice League for HBO Max, but it was 4 hours, like on a streaming service. And he was like, finally, my vision has been created. It's like, no, you wouldn't have done a 4-hour version for cinemas. Like, no way you would have been allowed to.
People would have pissed themselves in the cinema.
Exactly.
I certainly wouldn't want to be a director having to pick up the threads of somebody else's half-finished product.
No, and you can see why they got Joss Whedon because he'd done the Avengers. They were like, this is basically Avengers, but DC.
Oh, it's Joss Whedon, isn't it? He's a pretty experienced director.
Yeah, and it turns out an experienced creep as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, scandal noted. I don't follow the news.
Yeah, that's why I'm just inserting it for like, in case you're listening, you think he's a cool guy. Actually not.
Oh, is he not?
No, not at all. But the reason it's interesting is because Jack's like, oh, if I could have made my version and it would have been like this. Like, no, it wouldn't. It would have been in cinemas. It wouldn't have been 4 hours. You couldn't have done all the stuff. And it was still not great. Like, you didn't fix it. You made your version and good on you for getting to achieve your vision. But it wasn't what was going to originally come out.
What we get here is a very different end product.
Yes.
And ultimately it sort of is the original artist's vision for it, right?
Yeah.
Like this is, but it's retrospective though. It's always going to be retrospective.
He had 20 years to think about it and maybe change what he would have done.
And he had 20 years for everybody's perception, everybody else's understanding of this story to colour his perception of it before he then got to reshade it. And do you not think it's interesting that this at the time was known as one of the darker comic book stories, and he physically made it darker and grimmer in his recolouring of it?
It's interesting because I think when I was looking at people kind of talking about it, it did seem like people thought the original version was darker because it was more chaotic. I mean, dark, we're using dark in a very vague term, I guess. The original, I think, was more kind of chaotic and maybe seemed more violent because of all the red used and everything.
What's really interesting here is that we have read way more violent stuff recently.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And not even batted an eyelid at it. And this was considered pretty violent for its day, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's largely the ending, I suppose.
And the midway point as well with the shooting and everything.
Yes. But actually, as a 21st century audience, this isn't particularly dark.
I think it's dark in the sense of like the concept is dark of, and we'll get into the story.
We're going to have to.
But this kind of links
this 40-year-old comic book.
But the point I was going to make was to do with this. It kind of, the concept is especially dark of like trying to drive someone insane.
Yeah.
So like specific body violence of like someone getting shot, someone getting paralyzed, and all this, like taking photos of them, like that's all quite dark. But when you really look at the core concept, I think that's kind of untouched in like, imagine doing this to a person for the sole purpose of driving them insane.
Yeah.
And especially to drive them insane. So you could be like, see, it's not just me. Like, it's not even like it's not even like out of hate to like, like, was it Old Boy or something like that, where people like do like really fucked up shit to people to, harm them because they hate them. This is literally just like, I just fancied it. And I think it's that which makes it quite dark.
Yeah, no, I agree. Something that just struck me, and I'm going to get this in before we get really heavy into the comic book.
Yep, sure.
Is that in my head, it's still like 1995, right?
As in, you're living in 95.
Yeah, well, no, just sort of when I think of my point in my place in history and my point in time, I think of the 90s, right?
Right.
Because that's when I'm from. But in my head, something that happened 40 years ago happened in the 1950s. And it's all people going, oh, see?
Yeah.
On radio and stuff. The fact that a gritty comic book from the 80s is now something that's nearly half a century old is a bit weird to me.
Yeah, the passage of time it gets us all, and it only speeds up as you get older. So if you are listening to this and you're younger than 30, this is around the point where it really speeds up, and you're like, bloody hell, weeks and months are just passing me by. And, so you've got that to look forward to if you're younger.
Right.
If you're older than us, you're canary in the coal mine, so we'll, let us know how it goes.
But no, so this story...
I was just going to say, one other thing is the reason that the dark concept works so well in this, I think, is the facial expressions. I think how they're drawn, that's what really delivers it here.
Yes, and obviously, I don't know that we had a Batman comic that was as Joker heavy before this.
I think Joker had done stuff to Batman. This is the one this is definitely the first one that feels like Joker was more the main character of the story than Batman. Because he'd done like Death in the Family, he'd killed one of the Robins and stuff like that. But it was always like, Joker's done this. How is Batman going to react? This is more like, Joker's doing this and maybe Batman he's not going to save the day. So what's going to happen?
And this is it, isn't it? So again, I'm asking you, but I can't imagine that there was a comic book before this that was as Joker heavy, in as much as where the focus was as closely put on
I
Joker.
wouldn't say so, no.
And so this is the subversive thing that Alan Moore did. And Alan Moore, whenever he got onto a big property, did something subversive with it.
Well, what's especially...
He gets Superman, he makes his dad a Nazi.
Yep.
He gets
Space
Batman,
Nazi.
a space Nazi. He gets Batman, and he makes the entire thing about the fucking Joker, right?
So what's interesting there is... It was Brian Bolland that actually he and Moore were meant to work on something. It was originally meant to be like a Batman Judge Dredd crossover,
right?
And I think they just couldn't get the rights because Judge Dredd is 2000 AD, which is actually a British comic book creator. So they said, they went to Bolland and went, what do you want to do instead? And he went, I want to do a Joker comic, and they were like, well, like Joker comics, like main, like I think they were like, we still has to be Batman. It's like, yeah, but it's mainly gonna be Joker. And then
so it was his idea.
Yeah, and then they were like, oh, who do you want to write that? And he went, Alan Moore. So it's really interesting that Alan Moore is I think he chose Alan Moore because Moore is famous for that subversion. Like, I think he was chosen by Bolland for that.
Really cool, isn't it?
And then Moore was like, "Oh, I'll give it a go. I don't. Oh, yeah. Can I make him a heroin addicted junkie?" Said that on The Simpsons. It's fine.
So this is interesting, isn't it? Because what we see in Watchmen is Moore's brainchild. It's him saying, "This is my idea of what a
him
superhero
and Dave
comic
Gibbons. They worked quite close together on the story.
What we're seeing here is Moore working to a brief, right?
I think he was still I think Bolland was like, we want to do a dark Joker story. And then I think Moore just ran with it. I mean, looking at the bloody script, it didn't seem like he was filling a quota or requirement. I think he's still going on his usual self.
I like the story. I do like the story. I like the way it's framed. I like the fact that you've got these two concurrent timelines happening at the same time. I know that there's nothing novel or exciting happening there, but I like it. I think it frames the story really nicely and just kind of hangs it quite nicely. I like the humanizing factor of the pregnant girlfriend.
Yep.
I often find, and again, I found this with Watchmen as well, that things happen a bit too conveniently. Like, the story skips along. I remember it felt brief.
Yeah, it's only 40-something pages, so it's definitely it's a long comic. It's not a long graphic novel, but long in the sense of compared to like a single issue, not a run of issues from like an ongoing
short series. I mean, it's 2 to 3 issues of a comic book.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And again, you forget that something this iconic can be brief and can be, in places, a bit rushed, I felt.
I don't know. I think it went along a slower pace. I just don't think much happens. So I think it feels brief by the time you get to the end. But I think it's told at a decent pace. It's still quite short because when you actually list the events, there's like
maybe
we're going
3 plot points.
Yeah, we're going full story just in case anyone's going. It's from the bloody 80s, so if you didn't know the end of this story, I don't know why.
It's literally older than us. Exactly. I think we can.
So if you go in terms of the entire plot points, it goes: Joker breaks out of Arkham, but it's discovered after the fact.
Yeah.
Joker buys the amusement park.
Steals.
Well, apparently he got it illegally, but acquires. Yeah. And then this is all broken up, obviously, with the flashbacks, but that's a kind of separate thing. But in terms of the main story, which I think that more adds to the feeling of, like, how the story goes.
He then kidnaps Commissioner Gordon.
No, shoots Barbara, kidnaps Gordon, puts Gordon through the crazy thing, trying to make him insane.
Yeah.
Batman arrives, stops Joker, and then the end. So it's only, like, those points.
Yeah.
And then you've got the backstory of the Joker broken up in 4 sections, I believe.
Yeah, so we kind of meet him, we see his shitty life in his shitty house and his poor girlfriend who's suffering through it with him.
I mean, she seems pretty upbeat. Like,
yeah, no, she's pretty chipper. And then she smiles and says, "Well, you're really good in bed."
I literally made a note. That's like canonically Joker Mad Shagger.
The Joker fucks, man.
Is it Mad Shagger if he committed single relationship, but he's just really good at it?
I think that's more impressive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think having a reputation as being like a really good shagger is way more impressive than like volume.
Quantity over quality over quantity.
That took a while, didn't it?
Took a while to get there. It's been a busy day.
Bruce Wayne is getting laid a lot. The Joker is thorough.
Bruce Wayne, he doesn't get laid that much. He goes Catwoman and Talia al Ghul is like the only 2, and across like the years. Yeah, I mean, it depends. Sometimes Playboy Bruce Wayne, he gives the impression of it. I don't think he actually does, because I think he's just like, he just wants to present that to the world. Your Mad Shaggers are Dick Grayson, Daredevil.
Yeah.
God, who else?
Is Daredevil a top shagger?
Daredevil, maybe, I don't know about top, but he's Mad Shaggy. He's all around town. It's definitely, there's a funny joke in a few Daredevil, like, iterations where the joke is basically, how is it that you're always attracting and dating these beautiful women and you don't know they're beautiful? Or you don't know, like, you can't see their physical beauty. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. It just happens.
That's super cool. So yeah, canonically, Joker fucks.
Yep,
he gets down.
And is actually somewhat funny, apparently, as well.
But yeah, so we meet the girlfriend, and then suddenly he's like talking to the mob.
Yeah, he needs the money, doesn't he?
Yeah, he wants the money. I don't know that it's a need.
They've definitely, I don't know if I've just inferred this or I missed the explicit reveal, but I read it as they've found him. they found someone who used to work for Ace Chemicals, which they're breaking into, and they're like, hey, you're not doing too well. You need some money. And
that's even more convenient, isn't it?
Well,
either way, that whole
he's been poor like this. It seems like he's been poor for a while. Like,
either way, that whole plot point's a bit convenient. Oh, I just happened to be really poor, and I just happened to have used to work at a place that the mob need to get through to get to a playing card company.
What? Playing card?
Yeah.
Ace Chemicals.
Yeah, but they didn't actually want Ace Chemicals. They wanted to go through Ace Chemicals to get to the playing card company.
Let's double check that, because I didn't see it. I might be wrong, but dead on, we need your help getting through that chemical plant where you work to the playing card company next door. I think I just read over that because I was like, oh, this is... it didn't interest me, maybe.
Yeah, how did you not...
I think I was just going through this part, like, I mean, I was trying to read quick as well for a busy day and whatever, but I think, like, I had read this before, so I knew, like, this is where they proposition him, and they need to get in the detail was not... Yeah, that's weird, playing card company.
Right.
What was more thinking with that one?
Yeah.
Usually think, like, a chemical company would at least have, like, I don't know, precious metals or templates or, schematics for... I don't know.
Not just cardboard and ink.
Not just playing cards. So it's like, they think they're bloody Gambit. Like,
yeah.
Maybe it was Gambit.
Yeah, I didn't fully understand it, but it all just felt convenient.
But yeah, that makes it way more convenient because I just assumed that, again, from having maybe Mandela affect myself from like when I read it years and years ago. Yeah. I assume like they're breaking into a chemical company because there are rare, expensive chemicals or stuff like that in there. Or like, you know, like, the things to make a bomb with or stuff like that.
No, they just want to get through it.
That was my thinking, was just like, I just kind of put those two together. I didn't even think like, wait, what do they specifically need? Playing card company.
Yeah.
And even playing card, if it's like a credit card, like if the plastics were making like credit cards or something, like even that would have more, I don't know what Moore was thinking with that one. Maybe that's why, I think maybe that was like a shoehorned thing to be like, and that's why he has the Joker card from Dex. You know, that's...
And again, that was about to be my point.
Yeah,
is that it's a bit convenient that the guy who became the Joker gets maimed going through the factory the chemical factory that he used to work in to get to the playing card factory for the mob who just magically found him. It's just a bit too convenient, isn't it?
For me, it would have been less contrived if it was how I thought it had gone, which was that, again, they needed someone from a chemical company. They get a hold of the employer, actually. They're like, oh, this guy left recently. Check him out. Oh, he's really poor because it's Gotham and there's a really big class divide and most people who aren't well off are struggling. Like, it's, you know, that in my mind was like why I wasn't
contrived.
That's not
what happened.
No, the playing card company thing totally throws a spanner in that.
Doesn't it?
Maybe this is one of our rare but good when we get them, Alan Moore plot holes. Maybe not quite a plot hole, but definitely a contrivance.
Is this an Alan Moore plot hole moment?
Definitely an Alan Moore contrivance. And we'll have to add it to the board, and then eventually we'll send them all in an envelope to him and be like, you're welcome.
Imagine how much he would dislike that.
Do you think you would react to that better or worse than the people who are like, oh my God, Alan Moore, I love your work, like, forwarding over him. And we're just like, we've actually skimmed through your work. We've found a lot of inconsistencies.
We skimmed through it.
just a little skim, and we found some inconsistencies. And
gave it a skim read.
We thought you'd want to know.
So anyway.
Yes.
The flashback plot. So he meets the mob, and then they have him put on this weird red mask that makes him see double.
I don't know about. I thought it was just. He was like, "How am I meant to see through this?" And they were like, "Oh, it's got glass in it. They've got like one-way glass in it anyway, so you'd be fine."
Yeah, but he sees double through it.
How does he see? Oh, it's the panel with the two.
Yeah,
I think that was just to illustrate the eye holes. I don't know if that was
okay.
I don't know. Maybe it was that. I just interpreted that as like them trying to depict how he's seeing through it.
I enjoy that everything. So one thing that I do enjoy from the. Again, just going back to the art very briefly. From the flashbacks, everything that's supposed to be red is red.
I mean, in the updated version, everything is actually meant to be red is red.
No. So the flashbacks are all black and grey, but anything that would be red is red, right?
Yeah.
Like
the end, Wizard of Oz kind of like...
Or the end of Schindler's List.
Yep, or that much darker one. Yep.
We're doing a Killing Joke today. Yes. We might as well also touch on that. Yeah, so he breaks into the factory, shit goes wrong, the Batman turns up.
Yeah, who everyone's like, it's that bat creature that we heard about.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because
I think that's just indicated earlier on in his career.
Absolutely, and he's younger, and his nemesis is a younger. But I thought it was interesting because he's sort of nobody really knows who he is yet, and so it's implied that he doesn't necessarily have like the resources that he had before and stuff like that.
I think he started off as a billionaire, so I think he started off with a lot of resources.
Yeah, I suppose he did. But yeah, then the Batman turns up and he basically kicks the Joker into a big vat of acid.
Does he kick him or does he... I'm genuinely checking because I can't remember if he actually kicked him or if
I don't know that he kicks him, but yeah, the Joker ends up in a vat of acid, doesn't he?
Yeah, the whole point is like you inadvertently... I think he kind of scares him and he actually tries to help him. Like he tries to grab him before he goes down.
Yeah.
But the whole point of it is meant to be like Batman accidentally created his own arch nemesis, which became a very big trope.
Which is very Alan Moore.
Yeah, and that in itself became a huge trope in most superheroes after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So he ends up
in the chemicals, gets turned white and basically driven insane.
Yeah, again, a little bit contrived for me.
I mean, that's just the order of events as it happened. Like the in how they're presenting it. I think the only way the reason it seems contrived is like, what are the odds that his arch nemesis would be made this way? And I think the way I think it was meant to be done is it's these random turn events. The only reason these events are significant at all is because it resulted in the Joker.
Yeah.
So like them happening in the moment, if he just died in the vat, no one would have paid any attention to it. But because now we know, it's like, and that one went on to be the Joker, and everyone's like, oh, like then it all comes, back and everything.
But I think we need to sort of skip ahead because we've talked about the loose plot of the comic book, and dialogue is okay.
Dialogue is weird at
It's
points.
a bit hokey in places.
Yeah.
But it was the 80s.
But it's more as well. And he didn't really do that in Watchmen or V for Vendetta, which was beforehand. I think he was doing... So this kind of speaks to my kind of interpretation of the larger themes here. I think this is a kind of exploration of the superhero tropes. Like, for example, the catch and release of the villains, which is like a necessary part because it was a weekly issues, and it was like, oh, the Two-Face has escaped again, and because we needed him to do a new story.
Yeah,
I think it's on that, and I think it's also like the back and forth of heroes and villains, and like that's pretty explicitly mentioned when Batman's like, we go back and forth, and in the comic setup, they're gonna do that forever. Like, Heath Ledger and Dark Knight is like, we are destined to do this forever because I won't kill you because of blah, and you won't kill me because of blah. But in the comics, it's just, well, he's a popular character, so we can't kill him. They're going to keep coming back and they're going to fight forever. I think because he's looking at those larger superhero tropes, maybe like that's why he made the dialogue more tropey as well, because it's all
kitschy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's meant to be. I'm not saying I enjoyed it. I didn't like it.
It's campy in places.
Yeah, but I think it's there for a specific reason.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it is quite campy.
Like, Batman literally says at one point, he calls someone, you whimpering little smear of slime. I was like, what, Alan, what magic were you performing on yourself there when you thought
What
of
were
that?
you smoking? I know it was the 80s, but...
I mean, that's the worst time to be smoking stuff in the 80s. So
Is
I
it?
hear. Oh, yeah. I mean, there were epidemics of certain drugs during that time.
Oh, yeah.
I would say.
No, absolutely. Yeah, but that didn't really make its way over here, did it?
No, but Moore was probably in America at this point. I mean, he's working for DC, so unless he was working from home, maybe early trendsetter potentially.
I imagine they would have been hard pressed to get Alan Moore to go over to America to work there.
Yeah, but I don't know. We don't know, and I can't be asked to research at this point because I've already done a bunch of research.
It's a lot of research. So the ending.
The ending is the most famous part for sure,
and it's the most interesting part because here we have a very famous ambiguous ending where it is left ambiguous as to whether or not Batman kills the Joker.
Well, Bolland actually does address it in a post or prelude or...
I don't care what they say. It's an ambiguous ending. I don't care if one of them retroactively makes Dumbledore gay. That's not how this works. What we're presented on the page is an ambiguous ending.
Yeah, I'm just bringing up the bit because I think it's funny for how you describe it. So he says, speaking of which, it's time I've revealed what really happened at the end of The Killing Joke. As our protagonist stood there in the rain laughing at the final joke, the police lights reflecting in the pools of filthy water underfoot, the Batman's hand reached out and then ends.
Oh, cool. Clever.
So yes, it's definitely meant to be ambiguous.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think because there are two distinct hypotheses at play here. One of them is that a bad day could drive anyone mad. And then there's Batman's hypothesis, which is actually you put Commissioner Gordon through the ringer today and he's not gone mad. And the ending is left open for you to interpret the entire comic book either way.
I thought you were specifically referencing whether Batman kills the Joker or not in the end.
Well, yeah, because if the Batman kills the Joker, it implies that the Joker's been able to get to him and, make him cross that line and make him go insane. And if the Batman hasn't killed the Joker, then Batman's hypothesis is right. And, people aren't as corruptible as the Joker would think.
So you think the Batman was the real target, not Commissioner Gordon?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah, of course he was. In this sort of sadistic mind game that the Joker was playing.
But then with the Joker, I'm always like, I think he's one of those characters that like always has like backup. So it's like, the first plan didn't work. It's like, oh, actually, the whole plan was to get Batman to go crazy. Actually, it's like, but you would have claimed credit if Gordon had gone nuts from that. You wouldn't have been like, oh, glad that first part worked because I had this backup plan that was meant to be the real plan. You'd never admit that.
But why? Yeah, I mean, I just can't see how Commissioner Gordon would be his target. It's clearly about Batman, isn't it? The whole thing they're setting up is Batman saying, one of us is going to kill the other one. Maybe it'll be you, maybe it'll be me. And the end of the comic book leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not Batman was right and the Joker was able to push him to that. It's a story about our humanity, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's, like I said before, it's definitely linked to that, like, heroes and villains battling endlessly with, just over and over again, no end in sight. And I think more kind of use this as an addressing of, like, what if it did end? Like, or like if it happened outside of the comic book structure of, constantly releasing new issues and rebooting and what have you, this is what it would be like if it wasn't that. It was, these characters would kill each other eventually. So yeah, I see what you mean. I think maybe that was a starting point, and then he's gone into these moods of insanity and stuff. Although Moore has said, because I found some kind of his response to like how famous this book got.
Yeah.
He himself does say that he finds it's one of his kind of more simpler works and it doesn't really have much to say, which is not to say he doesn't explore the themes in the writing, but when asked about it, he's just kind of like, yeah, I just kind of did it. And it's like it's a book I did, but I'm not really that bothered about it. So, and maybe there's not that much more to say about it. It is just, what if the villain actually drove the hero insane at the end?
Yeah, and this was the sense that I got from it reading it. I've always liked it and I didn't dislike it. I enjoyed it, but I found the story to be too brief and, to be honest, to be lacking in depth.
Oh, this is, Moore's point, exactly.
And I found the dialogue a bit hokey.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad comic book. It's as Batman comics go, it's one of the better ones I've read.
I think the better way to put it is I don't think it deserves, I wouldn't agree with its place in like all of comics. But in terms of the Batman comics, like, it's the one written by Moore, so it's naturally going to be one of the better written ones.
It's not the masterpiece I remember it being.
No, and I think it has a lot of that shock factor, like, when you first read it, especially if you're used to superhero comics, or even if you haven't read comics, if you're used to the Batman films, like Burns ones in the 80s, and then Schumacher, I think his name was. But if you're used to that kind of thing, and then you're presented with this story where it's like, look how horrible the Joker's being, and then maybe he got killed in the end by Batman. It's like that when you initially read it, you're like, bloody hell. Now we've had that, darker themes have been explored more in like the Dark Knight films, and even more recently, like the Batman. Like and we've had The Boys and like Preacher and like the TV show Boys and everything, Invincible. So I think once you've been around all that, and maybe all that stuff is inspired by this. So maybe we're just looking at it too late now to have the same effect.
And this is something that I sort of touched on earlier, isn't it? Is that actually in the 21st century, where there is now an acceptance that media can be more violent, this doesn't really have the shock factor that it would have had 40 years ago nearly. Well, this came out in the late 80s, was it?
Yeah, 88.
88. So this is 36 years old.
Yeah, almost 40.
It's 36 years. I mean, that's quite a long... It's not really a very long time.
But then again, Watchmen was slightly older, and I feel like that's more relevant today than anything. And again, that is to the point I think Alan Moore had a real story to tell with Watchmen and themes to explore. And to be fair, I think this might help you a bit. I've got his actual response to when people asked him about The Killing Joke,
Go on then.
he literally said, The Killing Joke is a story about, I'm not going to do the accent this time, I can't be asked now. The Killing Joke is a story about Batman and the Joker. It isn't about anything that you're ever going to encounter in real life, because Batman and the Joker are not like any human beings that have ever lived. So there's no important human information being imparted. Yeah, it was something that I thought was clumsy, misjudged, and had no real human importance. It was just about a couple of licensed DC characters that didn't really relate to the real world in any way. Now, I do think...
that's scathing.
Yeah, I do think that's him. I mean, this was in 2003, so this was even before the re-release of the recoloring.
Yeah.
But I think there is a little bit of that of like, he's been spurned by the companies and he's, like done with it all kind of thing. I'm not saying he's wrong in the sense of like, it is about what it's about, what he says it's about. But I think even he doing this is still, again, exploring the tropes of superheroes in a wider way.
I mean, again, we've talked about this to death, but I'm going to repeat it here. His opinion on what it's about matters no more than yours or mine.
No.
Or anybody's for that matter. And people have drawn some wider themes out of this, and we have today.
Mm.
We talked about sort of these two disparate characters with their different philosophies on life and their different thoughts on the human condition and what we're capable of being subjected to and still coming out of it unscathed, right?
Yeah.
Batman thinks that humans are resilient enough to not be driven to madness by a bad day. The Joker thinks that he can create a day that is bad enough to drive somebody to madness, right?
And it's really interesting character studies in that way. Like, the Joker's so desperate to be like, anyone, like, it's not me. Like, I'm not evil. Like, I'm product of society and anyone else could be as well. And then it turns out, maybe you're not, actually.
No, you're a fucking nutbag.
Yeah.
And so, there are some broader themes here, but again, not much.
No. And it's really hard to compare when, again, we've more recently done Watchmen and compared it to that. And you see a title with more on the front and you go, well, we just read Watchmen recently. We're actually going to compare it. It came out just after. And it's leaps and bounds, like, different from Watchmen.
Yeah. And V for Vendetta has a lot to say about the world.
Yeah.
From Hell, I think, plumbs the depths of probably about as dark a topic as you could make a comic book about.
Mm.
I mean, other than the other topic that somebody made a comic book about, which is darker still, being Mouse.
Yes, the darkest topic, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose what's interesting to me is that I can see some of the visual language from The Watchmen being carried through here.
Hmm.
They look similar in terms of art style. What was his name? David Bolland?
Brian Bolland for this one. Yeah.
So it's clear that Brian Bolland knew what he was doing.
Yes. I do. I love the artwork, like the line work.
Yeah, and I enjoy the artwork. And if I'm honest, I enjoy the colours on both. I prefer the original. I do prefer the original. But again, it's a matter of preference and both exist.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that this isn't the masterpiece I remember it being. Yeah,
and that's an interesting thing when you consider, like, there are things I think that get elevated for different reasons. And especially when the world around it has changed. Like, I just mentioned all those darker, violent superhero stuff that's come out since then. We look at this and we go, oh, actually, this maybe wasn't, as saying as much as, like, other things.
Yeah.
But, I think that is the folly of going back and doing kind of retro looks at things like this. So at least we did a Joker episode to tie in with the Joker film coming out. Good old capitalism and SEO.
Is that why we're doing this?
And that's the darkest thing when you really think about it.
Is it still Joaquin Phoenix?
Yes, it is.
I like him.
He's good. He's good in the role. I don't think the film is the first one is particularly great.
I've not seen the first one.
You're not. I don't think you're missing much. I mean, maybe it's worth it for his performance.
I really liked him in that film with the computers.
Oh yeah. AI.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you liked that one. I thought that would have been like your version of a horror film, like a person scared of sharks watching Jaws. I thought that would have been for you. Like,
and I liked it.
You're like, oh, that horror film, Her, and everyone's like, what?
It is a horror film, though, right?
It's a horror film to people who are scared of AI, for sure. Absolutely.
I think the end of that film, where it turns out that
spoilers for Her, if anyone cares.
That same AI is having similar relationships with so many humans because there is.
Because she's an AI.
Well, it's an AI, and there is an infinity between each of his remarks to it, and so it just fills its time with all of these people. Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting. I also really liked him as Johnny Cash.
Oh yeah, that was like his breakout. I mean, he had big roles before, but I think that was like his mainstream.
He was really
role.
good as Johnny Cash. I mean, I'm a bit of a sucker for a music biopic.
Of course you are. My favorite one is Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
It's a really good film.
I really love the scene where Joey Cox is sitting with the Beatles.
Hey boys, I've got a new mantra. Paul's a big fat twat.
Like
Gold.
Paul Rudd as Paul McCartney.
Yeah. There's
No. It's Paul
Rudd. John Lennon, because he
then,
says the line, when you use psychedelics, there's no limit to what you can imagine.
Yeah, because then Jack Black is Paul McCartney, isn't he?
Yes.
Who are the other two?
Justin Long is George Harrison, and I can't remember his name. Is Ringo.
It's hilarious that neither of us can remember Ringo.
Probably
Ringo.
Yeah. Probably appropriate. So I've got two last points just to break, which I think are interesting. One is dark, one is not so dark. So I'll do the dark one first.
Yeah.
The dark one is why they or how they got to the plot point of paralyzing Barbara Gordon, essentially. This is like one of those big, what later became the term fridging, which was...
Fridging?
Yeah, so this is a big thing in comic books and wider fiction as well. The idea being that female characters are introduced, or not even introduced, but pre-existing, but are basically injured or harmed or even killed to service a male character's plot. Right.
So why is it called fridging?
It's called fridging because of a specific Green Lantern comic from maybe around this time, where literally they introduced a love interest to the Green Lantern character. Time I think it was Kyle something was the character, but they introduce her, and then if not the same issue, the very next one, he discovers her chopped up and put in a fridge.
Right. Okay. So it's called fridging.
Yeah, and I think that it used that name because that was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. They were like, you just introduced her one issue ago, and she's dead already. Literally, you introduced a female character to just motivate the main male character. So I think this definitely falls in that line.
Yeah,
Barbara Gordon wasn't introduced. She's a long-standing character.
Well, I was going to say, I recognise that.
But this is definitely like let's do this to her to further the two men's character, like their plots. But the darker it gets a little bit is because Moore actually remembers when he kind of had this idea for it, and he went to whoever the head of DC at the time was, it was a Len Wein, who was someone, an editor of the project in DC.
Yeah.
Apparently really bad bloke. I remember hearing other like negative stories in this context.
Right, okay.
But the one he said was he more asked DC, he said, do they have any problems with me crippling Barbara Gordon, who was Batgirl at the time? And he says, remember, he spoke to Len Wein, who was editor on the project, and he said, yeah, okay, cripple the bitch. And that was the pause was used to okay it.
Barbara Gordon was Batgirl.
You sound like Commissioner Gordon. Like, what? You're Batgirl? Yes, she was Batgirl, yeah.
How long?
For like a long time, yeah. She was like technically probably the second or third character to kind of be introduced in that. I tell you what's funny.
In the Batverse. In the Bat family.
I think she was introduced... I think she was introduced in the comic, but I think this might have had ties with the TV show, the Adam West TV show.
Yeah.
But I remember the reason that she was brought in was because someone high up in DC went, we need to introduce a female character so no one thinks that Batman and Robin are gay.
Really?
Yeah. Not even a love interest to either of the characters, but just like, hey, actually, you know what? It was either her or it was either a woman housekeeper who was brought in. It was one of the two. But they brought in a female character for that reason, exactly.
Just so people didn't think Batman and Robin were
But
gay.
didn't even, again, not a love interest. It wasn't like, look, they're having straight sex. It wasn't anything like that.
Jesus.
It was just like, well, if there's a woman around, like...
Literally created a fish and chips.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a dark one.
The irony, of course, being that Dick Grayson fucking shags. Top shagger.
Top shagger. Went a bit of a dark path after that, I think... But I think he was all right by the end. Like
Didn't he become Rick Grayson?
No, I thought you were talking about... no, I tell you what, I got confused. I thought you were talking about bloody Burt Ward, who played Robin in the Adam West... Because I was thinking of that like 60s TV show. Burt Ward went on to do like loads of gay porn after the Adam West one. So when you said like, oh, we know Dick Grayson shagged, I was thinking of Burt Ward. I was like, well, yeah, he did. There's a lot of evidence.
Did he actually?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
that
definitely.
Probably didn't help, did it?
No, but I think he was.
That's magic.
Yeah, I think he came out right afterwards. But the other point I was going to make, which I thought was particularly weird, was there's a scene where, and this is how I found out about the whole color difference in the first place. There's a scene where Batman's looking at a picture, and it's all Bat family picture, right?
Yeah.
And you've got really old school looking Batwoman, who was the original like Kate something, Batgirl, Bat Dog, or Ace the Bat Hound, I think he's like called. But he's in the picture, he's got a little mask on him. But one of the characters you got there is a character called Batmite. Now, I'm assuming you've never heard of this name before,
no, but
right?
is it a mite?
It's a fifth-dimensional creature who is obsessed with Batman, so he makes himself look like Batman. And when I say fifth-dimensional, I mean he comes from a world that we can't fathom because we are three-dimensional beings.
Yeah.
Superman has a character similar to this called Mr. Mixes Pitlick, but he fights Superman and he's like incredibly powerful. Batmite just turns up. He's like, I love Batman. I just want to see his adventures and see what he's up to, whatever. But I thought it was crazy. Like that character, he looks like a cartoon character. Like I know it's dumb saying like with all these drawn characters.
Yeah,
he looks like a
kid's cartoon character.
He looks like, you know, the green alien from Jetsons. Do you remember him?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, he looks kind of like that, but wearing a bat outfit. But I just thought it was so interesting that more in one of the darkest superhero stories that have ever been told, he was like, yeah, they'll Batmite reference in there.
Well,
and Ace the Bat Hound, like,
which kind of implies that at some point he was a comic book nerd.
Alan was a huge comic book nerd. He's definitely turned away from it now, but he loved comics back in the day.
He must have done.
Of course he did.
Because he didn't just, you know, he didn't just like get hold of these comics and go, I'm going to make Batman's dad a fucking paedophile or whatever.
I don't think that's been a story plot, but...
Well, no, but you know what I mean?
Point, yeah,
like, he didn't just get hold of them and go, oh, I'm going to turn Superman's dad into a fucking Nazi.
Are you angry that I turned your favourite superhero into a heroin-addicted junkie?
Yeah, he also...
I'm working on the accent.
Put in these little, like, Easter eggs for the real hardcore nerds.
Maybe it's a little reference on like the previous innocence of the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like he's gone from like, I have my bat family and this weird fifth dimensional creature who's obsessed with me and a dog with a mask on.
Dog with a mask on.
But then maybe that's his nostalgia. Now he's dealing with like, maybe I need to kill the Joker.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like a comparison, like, you know,
or not
nostalgia.
even maybe I need to kill the Joker, but
well, he's contemplating.
Well, it's not even that. He's wrestling with the inevitability that at some point he's going to end up killing him.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not even that he wants to or that he feels he needs to. It's that at some point he's going to end up killing this guy, right?
Yeah. Or he'll just as equally
be killed by him.
I love that he gives Joker that kind of added chance of like, you could kill me, like I'm probably gonna kill you,
but
or you could kill me. Like maybe you'll get one in one day,
you nutty povo, you absolute mad povo with a flick knife.
And I'll tell you what, when they fight later, there's one point I was going to bring this up because it was going to be too much like my little bits at the end, which we established interrupted the flow
like the
of
Joker's about to have him.
Yeah, and he pulls his mask down.
Yeah,
and I'm like, he should not have been able to do that.
No.
With like Joker's just like a guy, and Batman's like trained by assassins and all that, and he's like, pulled your mask down. It's like, you should, maybe there's a thing of like Batman was overly angry and, you know, was a bit more of a mess like fighting wise, so
you're led by anger, Anakin.
Yeah, exactly, and you shouldn't do that.
Do it.
And also, just as easily, Joker could have pulled the mask up. He'd been like, oh yeah, Bruce Wayne. But I think there's a running thing, which is, I think, cool for the character, where Joker doesn't care who he is. He's no kind of like, I mean, there has been points, but I think like the most common and popular version of the character doesn't give a shit who he is. No. He's like, I don't care who you are under the mask. I just like, I care about Batman. I don't care about some guy who you say you are when you're not Batman. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, one of the key points here is Batman's having a conversation with, I believe, Alfred.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, I don't know him. And just as much as he doesn't know who I am, I don't know who he is.
Yeah, exactly. How can two people hate each other so much?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then when they don't know each other, it's, well, actually, your alter egos aren't important. You are Batman and the Joker. Like Bruce Wayne and whoever that guy is before he's the Joker don't really exist in this feud.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I liked as well. I do like the joke at the end. Like, I think that is a kind of poignant thing. Like,
the fact that Batman stands and chuckles at it and then potentially kills him, it's quite jarring, isn't it?
But the joke itself, I think, is a good metaphor for them, especially because I didn't realize now until this rereading, the beginning of the joke is the first line of the comic when he's in the Joker's cell, and it says 2 lunatics escaped from an insane asylum, and it's that phrase. So I was like, but just blatantly telling you, like, here's the theme. Like, they're both crazy. They're both, like, wrestling with the same kind of stuff.
And again, the Joker quite correctly identifies it. You wouldn't be dressing up as a fucking bat and fighting criminals if you weren't a bit insane.
He literally says, like, what happened to you? And he just guesses, like, some similar things.
Yeah.
Like, and we as the reader know, yes, that is, Batman had one bad day. Now he dresses as a bat.
Yeah.
Like, it is like a very similar thing. They're two sides of the same coin. And
yeah, absolutely.
The old tropey, like, we're not so different, you and I.
Which is why the Joker he keeps the giant penny.
Yep. No, the penny's from Two-Face.
Oh, fuck. That would have been great.
I do remember seeing that. I thought you were going to like that when you saw that and the dinosaur in the same panel.
Oh, yeah, because the thing he has from the Joker is the giant playing card, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Which, to be fair, you see the penny and the T-Rex more often, but the playing card is like a famous one as well. I think that's the only other bit I was going to bring up I thought was interesting is this recently got a little bit retconned in Chip Zdarsky's run on Batman. And he'd done a lot of other stuff with the Joker, which is like absolute bollocks, which I'm not even going to get into. Joker has multiple personalities, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But what I thought was interesting just to note is he did retcon something in this where it turns out in the canon now, Zdarsky made it so that Joker's wife did not die. She had an accident, but apparently, like, so he was lied to, I think, by the mob or something. Like, right. I don't know. I can't remember what the explanation was.
Why did he do that?
I can't remember what the specific explanation was, but basically, Zdarsky did it so he could drop this bombshell in the latest Batman. They have like a year or two ago, like very recently. Right. He was like, "That's the woman who Joker was going to have a baby with, and that's the child." And like it's years later, so it's like an actual child. And apparently Batman found them and gave them like new identities and like, you know, witness relocation basically.
Yeah.
So he's known that there is this Joker offspring in the world that he's kind of hiding from the Joker. So I thought that was just an interesting thing for any comic book fans who are like, oh, let's I'll maybe check out the Batman by Zdarsky. Don't. It's crazy. Like it's absolute.
Is it
nuts.
Not good?
It's there's some fun moments in it, but he really swings and misses with some really large ideas.
I like Chip Zdarsky as well.
Chip Zdarsky's one of my favorites. Daredevil run, amazing. One of my favorite comic book runs.
I really liked his one about
Public Domain.
Yeah, I liked Public Domain. Public Domain was really fun.
And one day I think we'll definitely do Sex Criminals, which is another one by him and Matt Fraction. Very good comic.
You told me about Sex Criminals a few times.
So, comic talk done. End the episode. We are at what I like to call, and I change the name every week because it's fun. I like to call this Content Consumption Corner, where we talk about the content that we've consumed.
I've just consumed a bunch of Grey's Anatomy.
Really? That's it. I did not take you for a Grey's fan.
No, but my girlfriend is.
So now by proxy you are now.
Yeah,
as well.
So by proxy, when I go to see her or she comes to mine, Grey's Anatomy goes on.
Isn't it like series like 20 something now, or maybe not that, but like it's deep in there. you don't even ask.
It's a bunch of Americans in a hospital.
And not as good as Scrubs.
No, not as good as Scrubs. I did recently just rewatch a chunk of The Crown. But again, I'm not watching that.
Did you ever see the bit? Because I haven't seen any of The Crown, but I heard about this after the fact because it was controversial. Did you see the bit where Princess Diana's ghost comes back to tell Charles that it wasn't his fault or something?
Yeah, on the plane.
Yeah,
fucking weird, man.
I haven't seen it. I just heard about how fucked up it is. To be like, it's not your fault.
So, you know, I'm a little neurodivergent ADHD monkey.
A little?
Fuck off. I certain like TV shows will just make my brain feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And so like probably shouldn't admit this on the internet, but Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones just calms my brain down. Episodes of The Crown calm my brain down.
An interesting range of things.
Yeah, the Crown calms my brain down.
I really like for all the stuff with Chappelle and stuff he said about trans people and all that bullshit. I do really like his cadence still. Like listening to his cadence. I'll say about Chappelle, his first couple of specials are some of the best stand-up specials ever.
20 years ago, he was fucking hilarious.
Everything after that, nowhere near as good. He's riding on his own coattail. He's riding off his own like previous nostalgia and like what'd you call it? Like the he's been uplifted by this whole. He walked away for millions of dollars and went to Africa because he hated the system, and now he's back to tell us the truth. And I was like, all right. He did some of that, but I don't think he's now elevated to like prophet now, you know? I think he was really funny comedian back in the day, and he's not as funny now because he doesn't need to try as hard because people just love seeing him. Like my amateur opinion on one of the most famous comedians in the world.
But that first Netflix special where he doesn't weigh in on trans people super hard, Sticks and Stones.
Yeah.
Quite good.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things that I'm not even really watching it to watch it anymore. And so this is the problem. Like, I just rewatch the same crap telly over and over again because it just shuts my brain up for a bit.
What about books? Are you getting back into books?
Yeah. So I just started Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney.
Nice.
So Normal People. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of the concept of Normal People.
So Normal People was a book that she wrote about two Irish teenagers, and their kind of their challenging relationship, which became a TV show that was really, really popular, I think, just after the pandemic. She just published a new book, which looks really fantastic, and I'm kind of maybe 100 pages into her first book called Conversations with My Friends, which is really good.
Nice.
It's interesting. She has an interesting quirk in her writing, which is that she doesn't use quotation marks when people are speaking, which sometimes makes it really hard to differentiate who's speaking. But if you can pass it out, it's pretty good. Really good.
Nice. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, what have you been consuming? Well, I'll tell you, Joey.
Fucking up. Right, one minute. Let me set you up. So, Ryan, what have you been consuming?
Very considerate of you to ask. A few things, comics-wise. Obviously, got to start with the comics. I read one of the Eisner-nominated ones that we didn't get to, one called Local Man, and it's really interesting. Like, I really enjoyed it. The basic premise is, I think you'll enjoy this as well. Imagine if Hawkeye from the Avengers got cancelled from the Avengers, went back to his hometown in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, and is just kind of starting again from there.
Cool.
But this character, he can throw and hit things with like superpower levels. But what's funny about this character is, one, everyone hates him because he's been cancelled for reasons it gets into later. But also, he's the only thing he can't fire accurately is a bow and arrow. And
that's fun.
And his dad's like a hunter, so he's like, you never really were good with a bow and arrow. It's like, I've saved the bloody world with like paper clips and rocks and but the one thing that I can't do. And everyone's like, yeah, you're all
Can you
for
throw
the
knives and shit, though?
Yeah, literally everything else. It's just bows and arrows for some reason. He just is absolutely terrible with. Yeah, but it's really well written, really interesting. Like there's the way he looks, like he was like a big super with all the costume and everything, and now it's him with just like a red balaclava on his normal clothes, and he just carries like a golf. What's a caddy thing? A golf club with just stuff in to throw. Yeah, everyone knows it's him. But what's funny is he wears the mask because he was kicked out of this Avengers group. He's legally not allowed to fight crime as a superhero.
So he has to. That's interesting.
But everyone knows it's him because he's at one point he's like, "How do you know it's me?" It's like, you're wearing the same coat that I like just saw you in like earlier in the day. But everyone knows it's him. But because of he still wears the mask. It's like, well, legally you can't 100. Like if he's caught on video, it's like you can't 100% say that was me.
No face, no case.
Exactly. So it's really interesting in that it's like 5 issues ago every like couple of months. Like they do like 5 months of issues and then they take breaks and do more. So I'm kind of catching up from like last year, but it's really good. I highly recommend. It's interesting that they're still able to do interesting subversions of like superhero stuff. Like
who published this?
This is Image. So
cool.
Classic like sense. Image subversion of superheroes, but really good. The only other thing I'm watching a few things, but I finally got around to starting Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is the Donald Glover TV show of like spies pretending to be a married couple. Really good, but it focuses a lot more on like it's made by the same. He's wrote it and he wrote Atlanta. He's also got Atlanta director doing it as well.
We had 2 or 3 versions of that though, Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
There's an interesting story with that. So, and I've got very little.
Because there's the version with the
Angelina
famous
Jolie
Spanish bloke.
I think Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. What's the other version?
And then there's one with Will Smith in it.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Oh, that can't be right.
No, I don't think that's right.
No, but there are 2 versions of it, aren't there?
Yeah, so there's Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie version, right? Yeah. And then there's new version Donald Glover's doing. But what's interesting is there's an original like 40s or 50s like TV show or film or something like super unknown, like no one barely knows about it. Same title, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. What's crazy is the original one is about spies posing as a married couple. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie one is spies who are married to each other and don't know they're spies. Yeah. seemingly has no connection to that original 40s, 50s one.
Right.
Like, at all, but just has the same name, and no one bothered to, like, be like, hey, that's copyright, you can't use it or whatever.
Because it was so old.
Yeah, just no one like the original The Fast and the Furious is a film from the 40s. It's about people just racing, like high school kids racing cars.
Is it?
They were just like, we'll have that name, thank you. But yeah, seemingly the same thing's happened here. But now the updated one, Donald Glover's done, is actually based on the original one. So it's had a non-connected, just use the same title, and now an actual dedicated
now
like,
there's an actual remake.
Yeah. What's interesting is it uses like the spy work to kind of be like a play on the tropes of a new relationship and like the stages of it with like the missions they do and that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of holes in the spy stuff. But it's really interesting. If you like Atlanta, it's very close to that. So definitely worth checking out.
I'm yet to watch Atlanta.
Atlanta is a great show. Like, highly recommend. If you like anything Donald Glover, like it's his like masterpiece essentially. So definitely worth checking out. Also, there's one episode that has a magic invisible car for like no reason.
Excellent.
And there's multiple times with Donald Glover wearing loads of prosthetics for shits and giggles.
Oh, does he star in it?
Oh, Atlanta. Yeah, he's the main character.
No, I meant Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yes, he's main in that as well.
That's cool.
Yeah. And speaking of prosthetics, second episode of The Penguin, just watched that, and that is an amazing TV show.
Yeah, isn't it the Irish fella?
Colin Farrell, yeah.
Yeah.
Unrecognized. Have I shown you The Penguin? Like
I've seen it.
Yeah.
He's unrecognizable. It's incredible.
Amazing. The actual TV show is great. It's genuinely like a Gotham version of The Sopranos. Like, it's that depth. Like, it's not just style. Like, it's that depth of like story and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good.
Oh.
It's like, I think Sopranos fans are going to be like, it's not as good as that. It's like, all right, fine, but it's close.
The Sopranos is pretty fucking good.
But this is close. Like, it's complex. Like, there's character arc. There's like real depth to all the characters. There's like a interweaving plot of like who trusts who and
who put it out. Who made it?
HBO. Yeah, but it's connected. It's part of the Batman universe from Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson. Because it's obviously the same character, Penguin character from that.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's in that universe.
They're still tacking stuff onto that, even though they're completely rebooting the Justice League.
They're rebooting the Justice League, but they're doing a second The Batman film. So fuck knows what's going on there.
We've had so much fucking Batman, haven't we?
Yeah, but these ones have been really good. So it's like, again, super fatigue's not a thing. It's bad film fatigue that people have. If the super films are as good as The Batman was just recently, or bloody Deadpool and Wolverine on the other end.
Still not seen it.
Well, the Batman.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, one day we'll get some content out of it, and I'll strap you to a trailer like Clockwork Orange style and make you watch all the superhero films that you haven't seen.
Bit of the old ultra violence.
Well, to get you out of it, but with very PG rated violence. Exactly.
You didn't get the.
I got that. I know it's from Clockwork Orange. A bit of ultra violence is what. Can't remember the actor's name, but it's the main character's guy thing.
The actor.
Yeah, the guy who plays him.
You've only seen the film, haven't you?
Of course, I'm not a book nerd. I'm a comic book nerd.
The book's like 70 pages long, mate.
Mate, 1 page is too much.
It's so good.
How many panels are there in it?
So good.
How many panels are there?
No panels.
Well, that's not going to work.
Bubbles.
It's not going to work for me, brother.
No panel. Honestly, A Clockwork Orange is so good, mate.
Eventually,
you're missing out.
Maybe we'll get to a point where we'll do like content of swapping each other's like.
Yeah, but I've seen the Stanley Kubrick film. It's very good. It's just not as good as the book.
Yeah, but you would say that because
I'm not entirely uncultured. It's not that I've never seen a film before.
I would never call you uncultured. Like too far the other way, if anything. Like I'm never going to be like, you haven't seen the Kubrick film, you uncultured swine. It's like, yeah, but I've read the books. Like doesn't count.
Doesn't count. Fuck you.
Exactly. So my laptop's almost run out of battery, so I think we're at the end of it.
So thank you so much for listening. Ryan has been making YouTube videos that you should watch.
I've made one that I'm proud of, at least. So
I've
you should
not
see
been
that
making YouTube videos, so don't watch any of those.
He will, though. He will soon.
We have a Facebook group. We have reviews. You can leave reviews.
And?
Emails?
Yeah, emails, sure.
Yeah?
That'll do.
What else did you want?
Just send us emails and tell us stuff and tell us how much you love us or hate us.
What was your other call to action that you wanted? There was clearly something that
like 5-star reviews specifically.
5-star reviews specifically. 5-star reviews specifically.
I think at some point I'm just going to need to like make a bullet point on like a whiteboard and just like This one, like a grammar school, like.
I think the fact that the structure sort of fizzles out towards the end of the podcast and then I see us out is fun.
It's not fun. It's necessary because your energy levels, like, and lack of focus just dip from the start to the end.
I'm very focused. I have laid down.
Yeah, I was about to make that point.
Cheering. What you guys can't see is that Ryan is sat at a table right now.
Professionally.
And I'm on a sofa, and during the course of the podcast, I've laid down.
Yes.
There is a microphone attached to a coffee table. I'm laying on a sofa creating this podcast.
And if anything, you've laid in a way where you've gone further away from me. It probably would have made more sense to lay the other direction so you're still closer.
No, because I'm currently in the seductive Burt Reynolds pose.
If that's what you call seductive, then fair enough.
I'm no Dick Grayson, but...
whomst of us are.
Who among us is?
Exactly.
Who among us is?
All right, laptop's about to die, so thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.